Everyone, I'm Nick Phillips, Principal Urban Design Officer at Uttlesford, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about how we're monitoring our code post-adoption. So as Shelley said at the start, Uttlesford is part of Essex County. It's quite a large, mainly rural district. We do have the M11 and Stansted Airport in the district, and it's also midway or roughly midway between London and Cambridge, which makes it quite popular with developers. As a little bit of kind of planning context background to our code, we have an emerging local plan. It's currently at Reg 19 stage, due for examination by inspectors in the summer, but our existing local plan is very old and out of date from 2005, and we also don't have a 5-year housing land supply. So that does mean that maintaining design quality in some of the applications that we see coming forward can be challenging. We were part of the Pathfinders programme, so we were one of the 25 local authorities that were helped to develop a design code. We wrote a district-wide code, so this is what our code looks like. So we have the code as a single document, and then we also have an appendix, which is a character appraisal document for Uttlesford. Our code is based on the 10 characteristics of the well-designed base, and you can see in the structure our contents now, each section relates to one of those 10 characteristics. It's quite a broad-ranging code, being district-wide, so covers a lot of ground, but we have tried to sort of keep the format consistent by having all our codes in green boxes and guidance in yellow boxes and compliance advice in the pink boxes. So the fundamental objective of our code was to improve the quality of local design, and that's primarily what we're monitoring the code for now. We adopted our code in July last year, so we've only been using it about sort of 7 or 8 months, and that was a combination of a sort of 2-year process of writing code from inception through to adoption. Some general reflections on our code post-adoption. Our current design policy is quite broad and generic, and the new local plan emerging policy is some way off. So it's a very useful tool in the interim in lieu of design policy. It's also a statement of intent about the value that we place on design. By having our own code, we're saying that good design is important to us. And then this third one was perhaps a little bit unexpected. A design code is not a panacea. Schemes can comply and just be okay, not necessarily outstanding. It's quite difficult to code for design excellence. So why are we monitoring our code then? Primarily for 2 reasons. Firstly, is the code meeting its objective, i.e. is it improving the quality of design? And secondly, the codes themselves, how effective are they at impacting the various aspects of design that we want them to? And the first point is probably the most important thing to review. It's the fundamental thing is, is the quality of design getting better? But it's also quite hard to assess that because there's other aspects at play. We have having a lot more pre-apps, a lot more PPAs, and we also have our own quality review panel now. So it's quite hard to tell whether the code is the only thing that is improving quality of design, or whether it's increased levels of pre-app engagement and a quality review panel as well. So what are we monitoring? Well, we're monitoring applications. Firstly, do they acknowledge the code? We are still seeing some applications where they're completely silent about the code and don't mention it at all. And then if they do mention the code, do they actually comply with it? We do see some applications where they're saying things along the lines of, we think it's great that Uttlesford's got a design code, but then they're not actually demonstrating how they're complying with it. And then finally, is the quality of the design improving? And I refer back to my earlier point about it's difficult to say whether or not that is just down to the code itself. We're also monitoring the code, so which codes are most and least effective, which codes are missing, and which codes might we want to revise and refine. So what's working well in our code at the moment? Well, possibly this is probably the most commonly referred to and used code, which you probably won't be surprised is about parking. And this code works very well. It's very effective because it's clear, it's unambiguous, and easy to measure. Similarly, this code, which is about uniform building design, again, very clear and unambiguous. So again, this is an effective code that is being used a lot. And then finally, another code that is also clear, simple, and unambiguous about side elevations, corner turning buildings, needing to have ground floor windows. These codes are effective because you can't really argue with them. They're very clear about what they're asking you to do. So what could be improved? It's codes that aren't clear and unambiguous. I mean, this one is about, I think, if you read the code, you can see what we're getting at, but the wording is a little bit ambiguous and it's not that clear what we're asking the applicant to actually demonstrate. This code essentially is from our emerging local plan on open space, but it's a little bit hard to relate back to individual applications. So therefore it's difficult to use and measure its effectiveness. This code is quite technical and probably something is best assessed by an ecological specialist. So therefore perhaps feels a little bit out of place here in our design code. So what next then? So we'll be auditing all of our codes, one by one, similar to the examples I've just shown you, to see which codes need revising, keeping the most effective codes as they are, and perhaps revising some of the least effective codes. We'll be reviewing the compliance guidance, so that's the things I showed you in the pink boxes, to based on the responses we've seen from applicants, to see if there's anything we need to improve in terms of how advising applicants on how to comply with the code. We'll also be looking at the visibility of the code, so making sure that it's well signposted in any pre-application guidance. So there's no reason that applicants aren't aware that we have our own design code. And then we'll be carrying out a kind of assessment of code-specific design improvements. So, from what I was saying earlier about it's difficult to see whether or not the design code is single-handedly improving design or whether it's other aspects too, such as, PPAs and QRPs, we can do something to look at specific improvements that may have come about through the codes. So for the example I gave you earlier on triple tandem car parking, we can look at applications and see if we're getting a reduction in schemes coming forward with triple tandem parking, and that would demonstrate that code is delivering the design improvements that we're looking for. So some thoughts and reflections then on monitoring our code. I think for monitoring to be effective, it has to have a clear purpose. So you need to decide what you want to monitor and what you want to achieve through that monitoring process. And make sure you start early, preferably before adoption, as this could help with a reduction in post-adoption revisions. Essentially, early road testing of your code is early monitoring. and then review your code frequently. It's quite easy to use the code to review projects, but then forget to review the code in the process. Um, and I think, the main message is that the scoping stage of your design code evolution is probably the most important. Working out, what problems you want your code to solve will help you write effective codes that will mean your whole monitoring process of the code is much simpler and more straightforward. Thank you very much.